I always lock the door. Every night. Without thinking. But that night, I didn't. And when I heard the knock, I already knew who it was. My name is Elena. I'm 48 years old. If you ask me how I got here, this age, this house, this life, I'm not sure I could tell you. It's not that it happened quickly. It's that it happened in soft folds. Days becoming weeks, weeks becoming years. Like linen, left untouched at the back of a drawer. I've been married to David for almost 20 years. 2 decades of shared towels, holiday routines, arguments over bills that never turn to fights. We don't slam doors. We don't raise voices. We don't touch much anymore either. We function. That's the word I come back to most. We function. He works. He's good at it. Finance, management, something with charts and projectors and team dinners that last too long. I pretend to understand. He pretends I still care. In the evenings, he kisses my cheek like it's a habit, not like it's a choice. We eat. We sleep. We move around each other like furniture. And yet, we never speak of anything that lingers. The night it happened, David was away. A retreat. Corporate with scheduled team-building exercises and forest hikes that would give him stories he'd repeat 3 times each. I hadn't gone with him. I never do. I always say I need the house to myself once in a while. He always nods, grateful to have his space. He packed light, kissed my forehead, told me he'd text when he got there. I told him to drive safe. I meant it, but what I felt wasn't worry. It was something looser, like the release of a held breath. The silence that followed his departure wasn't heavy. It was clean. That evening, the rain started early. One of those autumn rains that makes the trees blur and the windows hum. Steady, soft, full of something that feels like a warning, though of what, you can't say. I made tea. Rooibos. My favorite, though David says it tastes like bark. I wrapped myself in the green throw from the couch. The one that smells faintly like eucalyptus and old books. I picked up a novel from the nightstand. Some mystery I'd started weeks ago but hadn't finished. And I read the same page 4 times without processing a word. It wasn't that I was distracted. It was that I was waiting. Though I didn't know it yet. The knock came just after 10 o'clock. 3 soft taps. Not hurried. Not cautious. Just present. Like someone who already knew they'd be let in. I froze. Not out of fear. I knew. Before I stood. Before I walked to the door. Before I checked the lock and realized I hadn't turned it. I always lock the door. It's muscle memory. Something I do without thought, the same way I brush my teeth or water the orchid on the windowsill. But that night, I hadn't. And just as I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. One message. Still raining. Can I wait here? Just for a bit. I didn't need to read the name. But I did. Caleb. 28. David's friend's son. He'd helped us move furniture 3 days ago, a new bookshelf David had ordered online but hadn't had the patience to assemble. Caleb had come by with a toolbox and a quiet presence. He didn't speak much. But when he did, he looked at me like he was listening to something no one else could hear. He had kind eyes. And that night, he was at my door. I didn't answer the text. I opened the door. He stood in the rain. Soaked through, curls dripping, a jacket too thin for the storm plastered to his frame. But he wasn't shivering. He looked at me the way the house had felt all evening, full of pause. Sorry, he said, voice quiet. Didn't know who else to call. I should have asked what happened. Why he was out. Why he thought of me. But I didn't. It's fine, I said instead. Come in. He stepped inside. Water pooling at his heels. I shut the door behind him. And with it, the sound of the rain grew louder. Like the storm had followed him in. I handed him a towel. He took it slowly, gratefully. His fingers brushed mine, not on purpose, not completely by accident. "Thanks," he said, drying his hair. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You didn't." His eyes met mine, held, then moved away. He dried his hands, pushed wet hair back from his forehead. His shirt clung to his collarbone. I looked away. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the kitchen. "I'll make tea." We sat across from each other, mugs steaming between us. He cupped his like he was anchoring himself to the warmth. I held mine the same way. A mirror, unintentional. It was quiet for a while. Not awkward, just full. He looked around the kitchen, noted the photos on the fridge, the flowers on the windowsill, the folded towel near the sink. Then he looked at me. "You always leave the door unlocked?" It wasn't teasing or suspicious, just curious. I smiled faintly. "Not usually." He didn't press, just sipped his tea. I studied him over the rim of my mug. There was something in the way he sat. Still, easy, that made the room feel smaller, warmer. He wasn't nervous, but he wasn't comfortable either. He was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But I felt it too. In my stomach, in the back of my throat, in the space between each breath. He glanced at the clock. "I'll go once it lets up. You can stay until it does." "Thanks." That was it. 2 people, 2 mugs, and something building beneath the surface. Not words, not even thoughts. Just something. The rain softened. He stood. "I should head out." I nodded, standing too. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back, his hand on the doorknob. "Thanks again. For the tea. And for not locking it." I opened my mouth, but nothing came. So I just said, "You're welcome." He left. The house was quiet again, but not the same. I stood in the hallway for a long time, one hand still wrapped around my now cold mug, the other pressed lightly to my chest, as if trying to still something that had started moving inside me. It wasn't that he stayed. It was how easily he fit into the quiet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. I lay in bed, the sheets too warm, the house too still. The tea I'd made had gone cold in the sink. I didn't bother to pour it out. I just stood in the kitchen for a few minutes after he left, hand still hovering near where his mug had been, like if I moved too quickly, I'd undo something I hadn't meant to create. David texted around midnight. "Long day. Phone's dying. Love you." I stared at the screen a little too long before answering. "Love you too. Sleep well." That was our rhythm, short, habitual messages that didn't say anything but filled the space where intimacy used to live. I didn't blame him. We'd both fallen asleep inside a version of ourselves that worked. That didn't require new effort. We were the kind of couple people point to and say, "They've figured it out." What they mean is, they've stopped asking for anything. In the morning, I opened the door, not to expect him, just to look. The rain had left puddles. The front mat was still damp. I stared at it too long, as if some part of him had been absorbed into the fabric, left behind. The next few days were normal. Boring, even. Groceries. Emails. A call with my sister about nothing. She talked about a new yoga studio. I said, "That sounds nice," and didn't hear the rest. I didn't see Caleb, but I thought about him. Not in scenes or desires, just in sensation. The way he looked at me across the table. The weight of his presence. The steadiness. I told myself I was imagining it. That I'd built a whole fantasy around one quiet evening and a borrowed towel. But still, the sound of the knock, soft, certain, echoed in my mind like it had a right to. 3 days later, I saw him again. Not at the house. At the market. He was standing near the self-checkout, holding a bag of oranges, looking undecided. I stopped moving. Watched him. He hadn't seen me yet. He was wearing a sweatshirt with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His hair was dry this time, a little longer than I remembered. He looked like nothing had changed. But when he did see me, when his eyes lifted and found mine across the aisle, I felt everything shift again. He didn't smile. He nodded. Just once. As if to say, yes, I remember too. We didn't speak. I walked past him like he was someone I vaguely knew. Like someone I'd once asked for help moving a bookshelf and never thought about again. But my breath stayed uneven for the next 20 minutes, and I forgot what I'd come to buy. That night, I walked through the house and touched things without meaning to. The kettle handle, the corner of the hallway table, the edge of the front door where my hand had hovered the night he knocked. I stood there again, not unlocking it, just remembering. The following weekend, David came home. He was tan. Smelled like cedar and campfire. He kissed me longer than usual. Looked happy. "Miss me?" he asked, half laughing. I smiled. Of course. He didn't ask how the week had been. I didn't tell him. We sat on the couch that evening and watched something with too much dialogue. I folded laundry while he scrolled through photos from the retreat. He showed me a picture of his team holding paddles, all in matching t-shirts. "That's Greg," he said. "The one who tells the bad jokes." I nodded. He asked if I wanted to go with him next year. I said maybe. That night in bed, I felt his hand reach for my waist. It was light, familiar, hesitant. I moved slightly. Just enough. He kissed my shoulder. I didn't flinch. But I didn't lean back into him either. Eventually, he turned over. Fell asleep with his mouth open. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between thoughts, and listening, not for footsteps, just for something. The next morning, I changed the sheets. Not because of anything, just because I needed to. I took the throw from the couch, the one I'd wrapped around myself that night, and folded it more carefully than usual. Then I made tea. Rooibos. In the steam, I saw him again. Not his face. Just the feeling that I had once been seen. He didn't touch me, but he moved something in me I hadn't realized was still there. There's a particular kind of memory that doesn't age. It doesn't soften. It doesn't fade. It doesn't make room for logic. It just lives. Uninvited. That night with Caleb was like that. Not a moment, exactly. Not a chapter. A room. One I hadn't entered in years. And now, no matter how I tried, I couldn't shut the door again. David asked me, a week later, if I wanted to start planning a trip. Just the two of us. Maybe Tuscany. Maybe Portland. Something slow, he said. Somewhere with bread. I said sure. But in my mind, I was still standing in the kitchen. 2 mugs. Steam between them. The sound of rain. He hadn't even touched me. And still, he had rearranged everything. I didn't go looking for him. I told myself that mattered. That not seeking was the same as not wanting. But it wasn't. Wanting has nothing to do with motion. Sometimes it's just the way your breath stalls when you hear a car door outside. Or the way your eyes flick to the hallway before you fall asleep, waiting for something you didn't ask for. I saw him again, 2 weeks later. He came by with his father, David's friend. They were picking up a set of tools David had borrowed and never returned. I hadn't known they were coming. David answered the door. I heard his voice first, then his laugh, then Caleb's. And that sound did something strange to my chest, tightened it, then loosened it too much. I stayed in the kitchen, pretended to be busy. When they walked in, I looked up like I hadn't heard a thing. "Oh," I said. "Hi." Caleb nodded. "Hey." He was in a dark t-shirt, jeans. Simple. Comfortable. He didn't linger. Didn't look too long. But when David and his father walked to the garage to gather the tools, he stayed behind for one moment too long. Our eyes met. He didn't smile, but something flickered there. Recognition. Maybe something else. He opened his mouth, closed it, then followed them out. Later, I found the mug he'd used that night, still in the back of the cabinet. I held it in my hands for a long time, then washed it. Not because it was dirty, because I needed to feel the water on my skin. David kissed me goodnight. His lips were warm. He whispered something about early meetings and not enough sleep. I curled against him. Not out of love, out of memory, of who we used to be, who we pretended still lived here. Caleb never called. He never texted. But one afternoon, a single envelope arrived. No return address. No message. Just a postcard. The image, a wooden table, 2 mugs, and a window blurred with rain. Inside, in small handwriting. Sometimes I still think about the door, and what it would have meant if I'd knocked twice. I held it like it might vanish, like it already had. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, touched my lips, my collarbone, not to admire, not to shame, just to check if I still felt. I did. The next morning, I went to the guest room, the one he hadn't stayed in. I opened the window, let the air in. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes. And in the quiet, I whispered, "Thank you," not to him, to whatever part of me had remembered how to burn. After isn't always later. Some things never happen. And still, they change everything. David was slicing apples in the kitchen when I said his name. "Elena," he replied, without looking up. "Granny Smith or Honeycrisp?" He offered me a slice. I took it, but that wasn't what I meant. I almost told him right then. I almost said, "Do you remember the night it rained? The night you were gone, and the storm wrapped itself around the house like a held breath?" But I didn't, because I knew what he would say. He would smile, maybe reach for my hand. He would say, "I trust you." And I wasn't ready to find out what trust meant to him, or to me. So I just said, "Honeycrisp," and bit into something sweet, even though all I tasted was something else. Something quieter. That night, I moved through the house slowly, like each room was asking a question. "Are you still here? Is this still enough? And what did you unlock, exactly, when you didn't turn the deadbolt?" I passed the front door again. Not to check it, just to be near it. I stood close enough to hear the wind outside. I imagined a hand, once again, lifting to knock. 3 soft taps. Still present. Still unspoken. I haven't seen Caleb again. Not in person. Not in any expected place. But sometimes, I think I see someone shaped like the memory of him. In the street. In a cafe. In the mirror. He became something else that night. Not a man. Not a guest. But a possibility. A door I opened not for him, but for me. And once opened, you can't close a door like that. Not completely. He never touched me. And yet he did. He pressed his presence into the air of the kitchen, into the curve of a silence shared over tea, into the space between his breath and mine. And that was enough to shift everything I'd built carefully to never move. David and I still function. That's the word I used before, isn't it? Function. And we do. He tells me things. About spreadsheets. About his coworker who buys expensive socks. About how I should try this new app for grocery delivery. He kisses my forehead at night. Not always, but often enough that I remember the shape of that affection. He never asks what I think about when I stare out the window too long. Or why I sometimes wear perfume when I'm just staying in. And I don't tell him, because I still don't know if that would be kindness. Or cruelty. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the floor in the living room. I leave the lights off. I hold the mug he once held, I remember his voice, the way it barely broke the air. Can I wait here? Just for a bit. And I remember how my answer wasn't a word, but a breath. A pause. A door opened without a sound. It would be easy to call it nothing, to write it off as a moment of confusion. A rainy evening. A boy with nowhere else to go. But that's not what it was. It was a mirror. Not of him. Of me. The version of myself that still waits quietly to be noticed. That still listens for footsteps. That still believes there's something sacred about being seen. He saw me. Not through time. Not through history. Just through the door. And that is something I carry now. Like perfume on my wrist. Like music I heard once, but never forgot. David asked me last week if I'd like to go away for a weekend. He said it softly, like the idea wasn't fully formed. Like maybe he wasn't just asking about geography. I said yes. We went. We held hands at a vineyard. He told me a story I'd never heard before. I laughed. That night, we made love. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't new. But it wasn't empty. He fell asleep beside me with his mouth slightly open. And I watched him like I used to, wondering if he'd ever really known me. If I'd ever let him. I don't think about Caleb every day. But when I pass the door, I pause. Sometimes my hand hovers near the lock. Not to check it. Just to remember. That once, I left it undone. And someone noticed. That once, I was a woman who left the door open. And I still am. Not for him. For me. Because after isn't always later. Sometimes, it's now. Sometimes, it's the breath you take when nothing happens. And everything does.